very broad and a wonderful guy, and I love him. But I had to send you out of the room. Because that's our tradition.
My mom used to do that.
Yes. But she was probably not just sending you out of the room, she was sending you to your room. Okay. Michael Douglas currently serves as the president and CEO and founder of Advancing Vibrant Future Youth, a nonprofit corporation that connects volunteers with opportunities to serve their community 365 days a year. He is a leader in networking and collaborative efforts in Stanislaus County, working with over 100 community and government agencies to lift up our communities one act of kindness at a time. Please help me welcome to our stage again, Michael Douglas.
It's so good to be back and to see many of you. Mondays are tough for me, otherwise I'd be here more, but it's great to see many of you again. And I hope today that we can give you a few nuggets that will not only benefit another friend. Not only benefit you personally, but also the community. And I appreciated what Elias was talking about earlier, because everything that we're doing in developing these alliances and developing methods of networking and collaboration should be lifting up our community at the same time. We cannot stay in isolation and just pursue wealth for the sake of doing that. We ought to be lifting up our communities at the same time. It is not mutually exclusive, and that's what I want to spend a little bit of time on today. Three quick principles that we'll be talking about and reviewing today throughout this presentation. Number one is that collaboration must necessarily take place within the city, within community. Collaboration must take place within the city, within community, and I'll talk about why in just a couple of minutes. Secondly, and again, there are many more than this. I'm just going to give you three today, but the second one is that collaboration requires sacrifice. Collaboration requires sacrifice. Without sacrifice, we're a one-man band. Okay, we may flare, we may have a momentary blip on the radar screen, but long-term, our effectiveness diminishes if sacrifice is not part of our collaborative process. And thirdly, collaboration requires long-term presence, sustainability. All right, so collaboration, three principles: within the city, within community, requiring sacrifice, and requiring long-term presence. Why collaborate? Why do this at all? Why show up here to GNA? And I believe it's because that we begin to make the culture better while we're enriching our own lives at the same time, versus accomplishing our own goals and then giving society what's left over. We've seen a lot of that. A lot of that occurred in the 80s, right? And understand, I'm a major capitalist. I believe in capitalism. But when we do that for the sake of making money, our community suffers. Right? So oftentimes what happens is, in the pursuit of profit, in the pursuit of wealth, society suffers because we don't address our community until, well, I'll save that for my retirement years. No, do it now while you've got the energy. I'm in a business. I'm basically a full-time minister and full-time vocation. There is no retirement in my business. I would hate retirement. Go fishing, please. You know, I like people and lifting up communities and seeing things happen. But that's just me. Maybe I'm weird. And Elias, you don't need to answer that one. In the process, we're helping create change. Is there anything in our society that you would like to see changed? I'm sure you do. And as we go around the room, what we're going to find out is we're going to have shared visions of how we'd like to see change. We're going to find competing visions of how we'd like to see change. We're going to find viewpoints that are going different directions, and that's okay. We're all wired to bring about some type of change in our spheres of influence, and that will not happen without this collaborative process. And in order to do that, we need to make the case for why we cannot stay the way we are. If you listen very carefully to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech, the majority of it is dedicated to why we cannot stay with the status quo. Listen to it very carefully. The last part of it, which really is the shorter part of it, is about the dream. But the first part is, this is why we cannot stay the way we are. Because it's dysfunctional. Because it's not treating people well. Because it's a threat to our society and our growth. Then the last part, we've established why we cannot stay where we are now. Now we spend the last part, this is the dream part. Here's how I see that we're going to get there. And I would suggest in our collaboration with each other that we approach issues of our community together in that way. First recognizing this is why we can't stay the way we are. Now let's address how we get there. And a big how we get there has to do with the collaborative process, which is what we're talking about today. All right, our first principle is a commitment to the city. Commitment to the city. Two major movements in our culture today. One is urbanization and the other is immigration. Not only here in the United States, but around the world as well. Lewis Mumford, a writer that's very popular today, points out that if only 1 in 10,000 people have exceptional abilities to move this world, they're basically going to thrive and there will be more of them and we're going to see more change if we're in the city. Because the odds are that out in the country we're not going to find that 1 in 10,000. Within the city we're going to find several of those 1 in 10,000. So the city is a breeding place of innovation. It's a breeding place of ideas. If you look at the history of philosophy, most of the great thinkers did not come from Keokuk, Iowa, which is a nice place. All right, where did they, look at world history. Greece, Athens, Rome. That's where the great ideas were, where the great philosophers were. They were operating in community with each other. So the city is a very, very valuable thing. Jeffrey B. West is the head of an organization called the Santa Fe Institute. He says, the larger a city's population, the greater the innovation and wealth per person. The larger the population, the greater wealth creation and innovation per person. What do cities have? They have resources. Cities, communities have things that you can use to fix things that are broken. The point is, if we're living in isolation, we don't have the advantage of all those wonderful resources that are there, not only to move us forward, but also to move our communities forward. And again, I would challenge you today, as you're approaching your strategic alliances, as you're building your networks here, to not only think of how can I help you move your business forward, how can I benefit you, but as we do this together, how can we move our community forward? What visions do we share of changes that we would like to see in our community? Are we pleased here with a 17.5% unemployment? Have you driven around town and seen all the empty storefronts? That's not a pleasant thing, is it? Newspaper yesterday talked about Devil's Lane down there near Hatch Road off of Crow's Landing. And basically the drug cartels have taken over there. People don't report crimes there. It's just a matter of fact the cartels run things. Is that the kind of society that we want? But you see, if we're just busy promoting ourselves and each other, we're not addressing the greater problems of the community. So as we work together to help each other promote our businesses, we also need to be thinking, how can we also benefit our community and begin raising up the level of our community to the change that we want to see. Immigration. Western Europe has 10 to 20 billion immigrants from Africa and Asia. 10 to 20 million immigrants. So it's just not the United States that's addressing the immigration issue. In the boroughs of New York City, just in the boroughs of New York City, there's a Dominican city of 500,000, a West Indian city of 800,000, a Haitian city of 200,000 in Queens alone, 2 Chinatowns of over 100,000, a Greek city of 80,000, Jewish city of 200,000, Hindu city of 40,000, an Arab Middle East city of 150,000. You see, so all these rich, wonderful resources from different parts of the world are gathered together in one place. But if we leave them in isolation, the city doesn't benefit. When we begin connecting them and take the energy and the benefits and the skills of each one of those communities, then things begin to fire. Then the community starts to develop. China is creating cities from scratch right now for the purpose of providing workers for factories. They're literally building cities from scratch to house communities that are going to help the economy. China has between 100 and 160 cities of over 1 million population. Isn't that amazing? China has between 100 to 160 cities of over 1 million population. America has 9. So what are we going to do with that? All right, let's talk a little bit. I've made the case now, I hope, for operating within the city as our basis for not only helping each other grow, but helping our communities as well. Now, the second point is sacrifice. Networking, collaboration without sacrifice breeds nothing. What it breeds is people who go and launch Ponzi or pyramid schemes to rip people off and eventually go to jail. That's what that breeds. But if we're understanding that benefiting each other sacrificially will benefit us both and benefit our community, then things begin to hum. Right? So when I enter into a strategic alliance with Barbara, I'm not coming to Barbara saying, Barbara, here's how you can help me move my business forward. I'm saying to Barbara, what can I sacrifice for you that will help you get to where you want to go? And the same with communities. We connect over 3,000 volunteers throughout the year, 365 days a year, with opportunities to serve. And it requires that sacrifice of the community in order to raise the community up. We take junior hires, 15 to 20 junior hires out once a month and have them wipe out graffiti. And it's not in their nice little neighborhoods and their private schools, it's right there where the gang shootings happen. A couple things we do. We teach them about the history of gangs in our area. We teach them what the graffiti on the tagging on the walls mean, so that then when they see a 13 or a 14, they know that's ceremonies or there's norteños. They know 187 up there means someone's threatening another person on the outside. So when they get to the wall, they're not only wiping it out and benefiting the community, but they're learning what's written on the wall, so they have an education as well. So these kids are sacrificing to go to these areas. That's happening all the time. There's a newspaper article about a business doing that. I think it was in today's paper or yesterday's paper. This stuff's happening all the time. Good things happening in our city, but it requires sacrifice. It's not all just about me. It requires sacrificing for you to help you move forward, and sacrificing for me, and us both sacrificing for each other so that we can lift our community up. It is more better to give than to receive. It is better to give than to receive. And that is the basis of raising community. You look at the founding of our country and think of how many people sacrificed their fortunes, their lives, to create what we have. I mentioned Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. a couple of minutes ago. Without the sacrifice of saying, I'm willing to go to jail for civil disobedience, what would have happened to our country during those times? Every significant movement in the history of mankind that is significant involves tremendous sacrifice. If we're going to benefit each other, it requires that I sacrifice for you and you sacrifice for me. 3 ways we can look at relationships. I can enter into a relationship with you, and it can be a 2-way street. I'm helping you, you help me, it's sacrificial, we make things up. Or I can view you as a dollar sign. So it's kind of a one-way thing. Have you ever met someone like that?
Yeah.
Not in this meeting, but I'm sure you've been to others. They go up, "Hi, I'm Mike," you know, and they're all smiling like this, and you say, "Well, so what do you do?" And you start in, "Well, this is what," and they go, "Oh yeah, that's great. Hey, let me tell you what I'm involved in. Gonna make you wealthy." And you're going, "Get out of my life." You can't look at people as dollar signs. You ever walk in, or people don't care. You know, it's striking to me in our stores, in our retail, in this day of high unemployment, why employees in retail outlets treat you like you're invisible. It's amazing to me. You're walking in the store. "Hi, I'm looking for this." Huh? Oh, aisle 13. "Listen, Bozo, look at me. Look at me. I need some help. You know, don't you understand that if you help me, it will increase profits, that will help you as an employee?" Some people aren't making that connection today. You know, look at the soccer. We have to be people. That's what we're designed to do. We're designed to be in community with each other, not in isolation. Right. So that's a whole other thing. Customer service is a whole other presentation. I won't get into that because that gets me really ramped up. All right. A few other things about sacrifice. Listen well. Listening well involves saying less, listening more. Okay, when I was on staff at one of our mega churches in town here for a couple of years, I spent most of my time listening. It was amazing to me. Couples would come in with big marriage problems, and I would sit there for 45 minutes going, "Then what happened? How do you feel about that?" You know, giving little tiny feedback. 45 minutes go by. I didn't say probably 20 words, and the end of it, "Oh, Pastor Mike, that was such a great session." I go, "It was? I didn't do anything." Yeah, I did. Because I listened. And listening is becoming a lost art in our society. Everybody's so ramped up about getting their message across, they forget to listen. So in the process of developing strategic alliances, in developing our networking, in doing our one-on-ones, I encourage you to listen more than you speak. And those little cues are important. So, where'd you come from? Tell me about your family. Wow. You went where? Wow, how was that? It'll come back to you. You'll get, you know, to me personally, if you complete the whole circle on the first one-on-one, it hasn't happened. All right, typically a one-on-one, you learn about the other person's story, or vice versa, whichever way it goes. But I've typically experienced, I learn about the other person's story. We haven't even started on mine, and I'm okay with that because then we make the next one-on-one. You know, maybe 2 or 3 one-on-ones down the line, we get down to business. But what we're developing is that personal relationship, and that is the key to these strategic alliances that we have. Genuinely be interested in the other person's story. Be authentic, and always, always, always walk your talk. Walk your talk. People know a phony baloney in a nanosecond. I spend most of my time in the poorer sections of our county, helping people who are in need. The first thing we do is we establish relationships with them. And we ask them, what do you need? Okay, if you're in need, I don't come to you and say, I know what you need, this is it, and I'm going to give it to you. And he's going, fine, do your thing, leave, come back again some other year. But if I come back to you and say, what do you need? Well, great. He may tell me what I don't think he needs, but my job is to help him meet that need because that's what's important to him. That develops trust. And then once we've developed that trust, then that strategic alliance begins to hum. That collaboration really begins to spin, and we get that momentum going that changes communities, that changes cities, that changes states, that changes countries, that changes the world. And it all starts with a trusting relationship. And that doesn't happen. Communities don't change if we don't spend time with each other. I can't benefit you, you really can't benefit in me unless we spend some time at the table with each other. Alright? So that's all part of sacrifice. The last stop on our little journey here is long-term presence. Long-term presence. This is so important. I think we've done a lot of damage, and I'm going to speak now, I'm going to put on my pastor's hat. I think the church in America has done a lot of damage to the country by doing hit-and-run contacts. We want the stat. Boom. We want your membership. Boom. We want your decision. Boom. Now I feel better. I got another notch on my gun. That, I think God cries at that type of approach. Right? He tells us to love Him, love each other. It's not loving for me to come to you, Barbara, and say, hey, it's great to meet you. What do you need? I meet your need. And then I walk away and I don't see you again. That's abusing you. That's making me feel good about me, but it's an abuse of you. Alright? So I'm going to take my pastor's hat off for preaching that sermon. But it does apply to our relationships in business as well. If we develop a strategic alliance, as our friend Jackie Sicoli calls it, when we develop that, we must commit to staying in relationship to make that work and to see the community benefit by that particular dynamic. If we just do hit and run, if we cut out just as soon as we've gotten what we want, it doesn't work. We have to stay at the table. People who are in tremendous need, those poverty communities, are really tired of their perception of the rich folks coming in from another part of town, making themselves feel good by painting out graffiti on a day or 2 days a year, and then leaving and coming back next year. That doesn't help. That doesn't help. What do they want? Need a relationship. You don't believe that I care about you if I just do kind of a hit and run thing. Right? To genuinely care about you, I need to make a commitment to stay the long term in the relationship. Now, a caveat to that, sometimes there are dysfunctional relationships. Are there not? Okay? Sometimes there are very, very, very needy people who are like a vacuum cleaner, and they suck everything out of you that you have, emotionally, physically, monetarily, and everything else.
Yep.
Okay, that gets into what we call a codependent relationship. All right? That's saying, here is a person really who is sick in some way. You know, they need some healing. And so what I do then, in being codependent, is I help them stay sick. That's the great theological term for that. It's called dumb. So, yeah, there are times when we need to back out of a relationship if we find that it's a dysfunctional one that is sucking the life out of it. The other thing that I would recommend is, as we develop these relationships, look for those commonalities, because that's what keeps us together for the long term. What do you and I share in terms of our perception of the community? Where are those areas that you and I can agree on? We may not agree on this, we may not agree on that, but here's something we may agree. We may agree, you know what, we don't like the gang problem. We don't like violence in our community. So you and I now can look at that and say, all right, as we're developing our business relationship together, as we're developing this collaboration, as we're helping each other with the profit line, how can we benefit our community? Maybe you and I donate some mentor time. Maybe you serve as a grandma to some kids who don't have any guidance at home. Maybe I serve as a dad or a big brother. You know, maybe we can do that together and go help a family. You see what I'm saying? So we need to move beyond just the individual thing. We need to move even beyond just the you and I thing and the collaboration to thinking, as we collaborate, how are we lifting up our community? How are we benefiting the community? And make that part of our strategy. All right? So anyway, coming back, I know you got things to do, and I'm going to do a little fun thing here at the end. But let me just review those three burdens. In terms of collaboration, and again, as Barbara mentioned, we collaborate with over 100 other agencies at Advancing Vibrant Communities. And much of that, our Lighthouse Live podcast, our broadcast, what we do is we promote other people. We promote other nonprofits. We promote other ministries. Why? Because it is better to give than to receive. When I am promoting you and you are doing a good thing, it helps me, it helps the community. All right, so that's part of that sector. All right, so the three burners again. Most effective collaboration and networking occurs within the city, within the community, because that's where the resources are. Secondarily, effective networking, collaboration requires sacrifice, personal sacrifice. If we're not willing to sacrifice, ain't gonna happen. Thirdly, it requires long-term presence, a willingness to stay at the table no matter what. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
All right, so my challenge is, how do we start implementing that within our relationships, not only to benefit us monetarily, but also to benefit our community? I believe, I know, because I see it happening on a small scale. If we do that, we can turn this community upside down for good. Right? We won't have 17.5% unemployment anymore. All right, let's do a little fun thing as a reminder there. Part of what I do is an entertainer, and so we'll just do a little thing here at the very end. The first point was in collaboration. What's the first burner that we talked about? Requires what? Requires community. Requires the city. Can you hang on to there? There's collaboration. Right there. Requires community in the city because all the resources are sitting there right in the city. Right? But if we try to do it alone, what we're going to find is we just wind up with a knotty problem. There's your receipt right there. For your right. Now, secondary, what's the second burner that we talked about? The city requires sacrifice. If we're unwilling to sacrifice, we have another little knotty problem in our culture where we get the Bernie Madoffs and such, we start abusing people. Okay? Well, I wasn't going to mention his name, but I did accidentally.
That's okay.
What's the third one? It requires what? Long-term presence. And I really want to reiterate that. If we just do short hit-and-run type things, we wind up with more problems than what we started with. However, if we're willing, we are very willing, when we establish our collaborative relationships, our strategic alliances, to do it within community, within the city, if we're willing to sacrifice in the process, and if we're willing to stay at the table in a long-term relationship, you will find that all those little naughty problems tend to disappear.
Wow.
Thank you for your time.
How would you, in a community that presents things like Love Modesto for a day, how would you see that being as a teaching tool to the community that participates to continue beyond just that day?
Yeah, what I'm encouraging Jeff to do, and Jeff and I experience 2 times a year, but people who are hungry 365 days a year. All right? People who are struggling with gang problems in their community are struggling with that 365 days a year. So as we're doing that, my suggestion is to use that as a springboard. We want to give you a taste of what it is to serve others. We want to give you a taste of what it is to be in relationship with people who don't think like, look like, smell like, eat like you, all right, or talk like you. And so now that you have that experience with intentionality, let's now move to the next step, which is making that a daily part of our lives, because there are daily opportunities to serve others. All right, so that's a long answer to your short question. I see that as a catalyst for a much bigger commitment. But it has to be done with intentionality in the presentation. And I know that's his heart. I don't know how.
I guess it's more of a comment than a question, but
Yes.
it kind of ties in with what she's saying with the Love Modesto. We see the news media talking about, all the coat drives for the homeless when it's wintertime, the food drives for, Thanksgiving time frame. And again, I mean, same thing with what you're saying. The people that are homeless or hungry, they're hungry all the time.
Right.
They're not just hungry and cold. They're hungry and hot in the summer, hungry and cold in the winter. But, until they start showing, like you're saying, every day, nobody's really going to understand that. Nobody's going to get it.
Right, and you know what, that is an education process. And again, I know that's Jeff's heart with Love Modesto. How many people are adopting that and saying, okay, this is my commitment now, I'm going to look for those opportunities throughout the week? I don't know. But when I encourage people to be involved with Love Modesto, my caveat is, use that as a catalyst, use that as a beginning for a much broader picture. And so, we've dedicated and sacrificed our bank accounts and everything else for the past 10 years with ABC to do that everyday thing, to provide the opportunity and triage those opportunities so that anybody who wants to serve consistently can have a lead to do that. They don't have to go find them on their own. You're exactly right. And the problem is, and this is a major element of this, you got to give up who gets credit. If you're worried about who gets credit, it's destined for failure. All right? The problem with the media is somebody's getting credit. So then people start to position themselves, in front of the camera. They start to position themselves, so that we can get the credit. So I think one of the important elements is that we approach these opportunities as strategic alliances without worrying about who gets the credit. Now let me give you the flip side of this. And some of you know this very well, who know me well. There is a flip side to this, and that is we basically are one of the best kept secrets in town. I'm not about doing this. I don't call up Channel 13, I don't call the Modesto Bee we're doing. I figure, hey, God knows we're doing it, that's all who needs to know, all right? The benefits will follow. But when it comes time in the nonprofit world as a CEO to do fund development, nobody knows who the heck you are, all right? And so there's a trade-off. You do have to do some promotion so that you can say, well, remember all these 10 years of giving people rights to their medical appointments? Remember these 10 years of building wheelchair ramps for people that can't afford them? We did that, and so we would like you to give to this 501c3 so that we can continue doing that. Well, I didn't know that. All right, so it's a tough balance. My problem is I tend to default towards not bragging about it, just doing it. My board reminds me, you also need to get the name out there, from time to time. So.
In that case, I would say to hire someone for the biographer and someone for the cheerleader and someone for the personal, attack to the media, to make sure somebody else is flagging it down, because I see a lot of people that are doers. You don't toot your own horn because you're so busy.
Exactly.
And you're learning on the job because you're putting your efforts into it. And
Exactly.
There's no amount of how many things you've done if you haven't mentored someone along with you, that it dies with you as well.
Well, and that's the point of being in community. Okay, I am not a marketer. Okay, good public speaker, I can do that. All right, I can get message, know how to build alliances. I am not a marketer. All right, so I have to be smart enough to say, at some point, if we have the funding, we need to hire someone who is an expert at that and be in community with them and allow them to do that job. Then we can both succeed. One more.
put another question for it. Yes. Could you share your 12-12-12 program? And I'd like to challenge everybody to be a member of the 12.
Oh, the baker's, the servant's dozen?
Yes.
This is something, let's do this very quickly because I know we're bumping time. What we've encouraged people to do, and this is not, I don't want to do commercial for each, but since you brought it up, all right. What we encouraged people to do was serve once a month, 12 times a year. Look for one thing to do to serve someone else 12 times a year, once a month. All right, that's the first 12. The second one is recruit someone else to come with you next time. All right, so at the end of the year, you may have 12 or 13 more volunteers. So the first one is serve 12 times a year, once a month. The second one is bring someone along to serve with you to infect them so they become serving 12 times a month. And the other is, you know, if you have the resources, we'd love to take your tax-deductible donation 12 times a year as well. Okay? So that's the servant's dozen that you were talking about. Hope I didn't violate your boundaries.
That's okay.
No, that was good.
That's great.
Good. Anything
Anyone else?
Did you have a question?
I just want to thank you for coming out here and giving us that great explanation. It was great.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Mike. Yes.
We want to keep you.
Absolutely.
It's that long-term commitment we want.
Good job.
Here we go. Here we